Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today I wanted to do a video regarding what's called the chart of coercion, and it outlines the victimization process in really any form of abuse or power and control dynamic. So here we have the different stages of coercion. The first stage is called isolation. This is where the perpetrator will purposely isolate the victim in an attempt to gain more power and control over them. If they can get them isolated from friends, family, etc., they have less supports to rely on. This could be mental isolation, social isolation, physical isolation, any or all of the above. I have worked with people who've been physically moved to another country and have been isolated that way, or the perpetrator may make comments like, I don't want you talking to that person, or why are you wasting time spending time with that person, or I don't want you talking to your mom, things like that. So just know that those comments or those behaviors are a type of isolation. Okay, number 2 is monopolization of perception. So this is also known as gaslighting, and this entire process is the brainwashing process, ultimately where someone has complete power and control over you. So the monopolization of perception. This is when the abuser starts to make you question your own sense of reality, and you start asking yourself, okay, am I crazy? Am I making things up? What is going on here? And the example that I usually give for this is, let's say you are in a conversation with them and you're like, hey, look at that beautiful blue sky. And they're like, what are you talking about? The sky is purple. And you're like, I'm pretty sure it's blue. I don't think that I'm mistaken by this. And they just keep berating you and saying, well, what are you talking about? You're so stupid. I can't believe that you would ever think it's blue, da-da-da-da-da. They just keep going, and over time, you start to really question your own sense of reality or your own perception. And they make you start second-guessing yourself, and then you start saying things to yourself like, oh, well, maybe I was wrong, or maybe I am crazy. Maybe the sky really is purple. And over time, they completely monopolize your sense of reality or your perception of reality. And ultimately, you become dependent upon them for how they see the world. And they have you isolated, so you don't really have a lot of outside supports to check in. So here you go. It's a very slippery slope from here. Once they have their hooks in you, and you're relying on them for information and your sense of perception, then it's so much easier to start doing other things. So the third stage is some of the more degrading behaviors. So they'll engage in humiliation and degradation. This could look like humiliating you in front of friends or family. It could look like humiliating you on social media. It could look like making completely degrading remarks towards you, telling you that you're fat, ugly, stupid, etc. At the extreme end, there is degrading down to animal level concerns, locking you in closets, locking you in other places, not allowing you to go to the bathroom, making you eat dirty food, throwing your food away that you cooked, saying that it's disgusting, and then making you eat it out of the trash, or making you get down and scrub the floor with a toothbrush. Completely degrading behaviors meant to destroy you as a human being. Now again, there's a spectrum with this, so we're not necessarily always going to see the extreme level of degradation, especially right off the bat, but it will continue to escalate as abuse does. So the fourth phase is exhaustion. So this is where the abuser has you completely mentally and physically exhausted. They'll do things to tire you out so that fighting back feels completely futile. They may make you work both inside and outside of the home, so you may be completely physically exhausted that way. You may have to work outside the home, then come home, do all of the chores around the house, do all of the cooking, take care of the kids, etc. And guess what? The abuser is just sitting there dictating to you what to do, but this has become so normal that you don't really question it, and you don't have the supports to rely on to really question it either. So there you go. You just kind of put up with it thinking that this is normal, this is what you're supposed to do, etc. They may also do things like semi-starvation. So I have worked cases where the perpetrator would purposely restrict food that the victim was allowed to eat, starving them while pregnant. I mean, all of this stuff actually happens. The examples I've given you are real examples, real cases. This stuff really does happen. Sleep deprivation, constantly waking you up in the middle of the night, or turning the temperature up so high that you have problem sleeping. All of those are designed to exhaust you, completely debilitate you, so you give up, you're too tired. Prolonged interrogation, so sitting you down and maybe pointing in your face and accusing you of things, asking you repeated questions. Where were you? I know you were doing this. I know you were doing that, etc. So once they have you completely isolated and coerced into believing their sense of reality, completely exhausted you, now they can do threats or any sort of assaults, physical or sexual violence that they want. So they may start out making threats or intimidation tactics, or they may actually move into more physically or sexually abusive behaviors. This could look like threats to kill you, threats of leaving you, threats of taking your kids away, threats of hurting your family, hurting your dog, hurting your kids. It could look like actual physical or sexual violence, pushing, shoving, stepping on you, restraining, holding you down during sex, pinning you down, coercing you into having sex, etc. So threats and violence occurs here. Then after they've done all this stuff to you, the part that keeps people often hooked in these situations and in this cycle is the occasional indulgence, or like throwing you a bone. So they may give you some sort of treat or reward or something that makes them feel like they really care about you, when in reality it's just all part of the process. So in the abuse cycle, the tension, explosion, honeymoon phase, the occasional indulgences would be part of the honeymoon phase. So this is where they may say nice things to you. They may apologize. Of course, it's empty apologies. It doesn't mean anything, but this is where they may apologize and say how sorry and act remorseful, etc. They may give gifts, buy you things, take you to dinner, take you on trips. They do things to make you feel special, but again, it's it's occasional, it's within that cycle, and it's just enough to keep you hooked, thinking, oh, maybe this time they're going to change. And you stay hooked in this relationship out of hope and fear, hoping that it's going to change, or you're so afraid of what the potential consequences are going to be if you do leave, you just stay in a state of compliance to kind of keep like the status quo. Okay, the next phase is now they're in a place where they can demonstrate complete omnipotence. So this is where the abuser will appear to be completely godlike to the victim. The victim no longer has any sort of autonomy, any sort of sense of self. They no longer feel like they have the ability to make decisions or have opinions. The abuser has become essentially their universe, their God, so to speak. Not necessarily that they're worshiping them, but the abuser becomes godlike in power. They seem all-powerful because now they can have the victim do anything that they want. This could be confrontation, continued violent acts, threats, assaults, basically showing complete control. They may be monitoring things that you're using, tracking you, etc. And they may have knowledge about where you go, who you talk to, and you're like, how do you know all of this? Well, because essentially they're stalking you, which is a crime, by the way. And then the last stage is enforcing trivial demands. So this is essentially just the abuser in their egocentrism and or narcissism will have you do things just because they can. It's almost like I have you now, and I'm going to show you who's in control and how little power you really have. So, like it says here, it develops a habit of compliance. You just retain compliance on them. An example that I usually give for this is, let's say you're coming home for the evening, or you're out at the store or whatever, the abuser calls you and says, hey, I need you to bring home milk or eggs or something trivial like that. And you're like, oh, well, that's funny because, you know, I looked in the refrigerator this morning and it looks like we had plenty of that stuff. And their response is something to the effect of, well, I told you that that's what we need and that's what I need you to get. Don't question me, or else there's going to be hell to pay, etc. So it's just enforcing these stupid little demands that really mean nothing. Or on the more extreme end, more degrading demands. Again, having you scrub things with a toothbrush, or having you go over things with a finely toothed comb, being very detail-oriented, nitpicking you, needing to make sure that all of the labels are lined up in correct order, or whatever. Just something ridiculous. It's trivial demands, but for them, it is ultimate power and control. So once a victim has reached all of these stages, it is nearly impossible at that point in time to leave. They may or may not even realize that there is a problem until things get to a point where maybe somebody else says something, or the abuse crosses a line so that the victim kind of wakes up from this sort of brainwashed state, and they realize just how deep into this they are. The victim has to be way down here in one of these stages before they ever realize what is actually going on and then by then it's ultimately too late. So that is the chart of coercion and the process of victimization. So I hope that this information was helpful regarding the chart of coercion and the victimization process. I hope that it's helpful for anyone who may be in an abusive situation, or for any family members of those or friends. This is the reason why it is so difficult for victims to leave abusive relationships, and often don't even realize, like I said, until they are already so deep in the abusive relationship that it's almost too late to do anything, especially in the moment. So please be kind and patient and compassionate with victims of domestic violence and other forms of abuse, because this really is a much more complicated dynamic than the general population has any knowledge about. It is not that easy to just leave any abusive situation, whether it's domestic violence, child-parent abuse, cult-type relationships, abusive friendships, abusive toxic work environments. It's not always that easy to just get up and leave, especially if you don't even realize that it's happening to you. So please keep in mind that abuse is very insidious. It creeps up on you, and you're already in the snares and the hooks before you realize or recognize what's happened. So again, please be very kind and patient and compassionate towards anyone who you may know who is in an abusive situation, or if you yourself are in an abusive situation. Please feel free to reach out to me, or to reach out to hotlines, social workers, etc. There is help available. I will continue to provide resources and hotlines to shelters and information so that you can get the help that you need. I will continue providing abuse education and information for the general public. I do think it's something that isn't as talked about as it should be. So stay tuned for my future videos. All right, thanks so much. Bye.